Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Corner Booth. I'm Luis Escobar, and I'm here with
Larry Whitaker.
And we're going to be talking today with Swinton Scott. We're here at the Hill Street Cafe. And
you sure about that?
Yes.
Okay. We practiced this 5 times before you hit play, or record it.
Well, the 6th time, you know. So we're okay. So Swinton, you've worked everywhere. I met Swinton for the first time working on The Simpsons. He was one of the first directors I worked for.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it was Jeff.
Obviously.
Then Mark Kirkland, and then it was you and Carlos.
Obviously, Luis made a big impression on Swinton since he just realized that.
It was a long time ago. So Carlos was directing.
Yes.
Okay.
And you were his AD. But I had more interaction with you than I did with Carlos.
Well, the directors a lot of times have so much other stuff to do, redoing the boards and redoing all the other layouts and stuff, that they don't always have time to talk to the layout crew. So I would try to pick up the slack.
So how'd you get into animation to begin with?
Well, when you spend your childhood reading comics and watching cartoons on TV, is there anything else you're qualified to do?
Rob Banks.
It's like, what are your choices here? You could be a comic book artist, so you can draw comic books all day, but it's not a steady paycheck. You can get into animation, and for 6 months a year, you got a steady paycheck, and for 6 months, you're on unemployment. So those were my choices, and New York animation biz was kind of closing down. The guys in New York that I would go see would say, you should go to California, there's not too much work left here in New York. And this is after Raggedy Ann and Andy, so there was a lot of guys that already come out here. And so I found that I had a cousin out here and lived out here with her for a little while. And after about 8 months, I got a job at Pantomime Pictures, a really small studio doing Sesame Street and commercials. And that was like a dream come true to do Sesame Street. And I thought, I've already hit my goal. It can only get worse from here. Yeah.
Did it?
It did, yeah. Because
I worked on The Simpsons.
because I had to start freelancing for Hanna-Barbera on their shows. And that's I would do it at the studio at Pantomime Pictures, and I would take it home and work on it at night and weekends. And it was assistant animation on shows like Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, Laverne and Shirley in the Army,
Oh, no.
Wow.
Pac-Man, Gary Coleman the Angel Show, Trollkins,
Wow, those
Smurfs,
Well, Smurfs is okay.
Well, Smurfs.
Scooby-Doo.
Oh, wait, now you got to tell me, which was more fun, the Smurfs or the Fonz?
Fonz was really hard because checking would actually send the drawings back and say, this scene you did where Fonz's head is about 3/4 to half an inch big, he's off model. You have to redraw his face on every drawing as he's walking across the screen. And I said, how am I supposed to do that? And this is before everybody had a Xerox machine.
I thought assistants were supposed to do that for you.
I was the assistant. So in order to get him to look just right and not having a Xerox machine, luckily Fred had what's called a lucograph machine in the office. You put the drawing in down here, and there's a lens in between you and the drawing, and a light comes on, and it projects the drawing up onto a glass, and you're under a big hood, and then you trace the drawing. And that's how you blew up and enlarged or shrank drawings down.
Wow.
Yeah. So those went away. Anyway, they sent the scene back and said, he's off model, redo it. I said, oh man, struggled enough doing it. It's just the Fonz walking across the screen. And when I saw it on TV, he was so small on the small field shot, nobody would care. And I waited for that scene to come up, and it came up. I said, what a waste. I had so much more fun doing that in-betweening on Sesame Street, because I had been watching that since I was a teenager when I was babysitting. And afternoons, babysitting these 3 kids, we'd watch Sesame Street and Popeye cartoons. And sometime in high school, I guess, I started to think, it might be a living to be made doing animation. But I still want to do comic books.
So just a quick comment on in between. 'Cause a lot of people that are listening, we've got new people that are joining all the time, are animation fans, not animation pros.
Yeah.
So in between is what?
Filling in the gaps between the extremes that the animator does. And
So doing the extra drawings that fall in between extreme drawings or posing that the animator draws.
so every extreme drawing the animator does of a guy walking, he only does the first drawing and the 8th drawing, and as an in-betweener, assistant animator, you have to do all the 7 drawings in between to complete the action. I should have brought in, I actually have, my parents saved this for me, a stack of drawings of assistant animation I did for various TV cartoons in 1981,
Wow.
including Hero High and Black Star for Filmation,
Wow.
Trollkins, and I think there was like 5 or 6 shows in there. I had just sent them various in-between drawings, and they saved them, and I just found them last year in an envelope. I said, what's in here? And it's just full of my in-between drawings, my rough drawings that I didn't use.
Right.
You know, I had forgotten that I sent them to them.
Wow.
So I should have brought those along so you could see, this is what in-betweening was about in those days. This is what we were toiling over, you know. So yeah, it was a lot of work. Fred Flintstone, they had a Flintstone show on. I was in-betweening on that. I was in-betweening on Dino and Cave Mouse, which was directed by Tex Avery.
What?
Yeah,
I've heard of him. Didn't he create Bugs Bunny?
some say.
And Daffy?
Or was that Chuck Jones? It was Tex Avery. Chuck Jones developed him. Just wanted to say, I'm a big Looney Tunes guy. You and I worked at Tiny Toons at the same time, different crews, and did a lot of Looney Tunes stuff in the past. So we all know who really did what.
Well, Chuck Jones has a very good PR machine in his head. So he knows how to talk to the press. He used to be head of children's programming at ABC at one time. I mean, Tex Avery could never have done that job, but Chuck Jones knows how to spin a yarn and make you think that he's an intellectual, so he could get a job like that.
So you worked with Tex Avery?
No. When
Or
I did this
you
work
worked
for
for-
when I did this work for Hanna-Barbera, what they would do is they would subcontract these shows to 3 or 4 different little studios around town.
Oh.
Now, one of those studios was called Love, Hutton, Love, and Ed Love and his son Tony Love and Bill Hutton were the 3 principals. Ed Love was an animator from the 30s and 40s, way back on Fantasia. He animated some of the broom scenes in Fantasia, so he knew how to animate really well. He was in Tex Avery's unit for a little bit. So these 3 guys ran this unit of subcontracting animation, and that's who I got my work from, was those guys.
Okay.
Did you work with? We interviewed June Patterson, who is the widow of Ray Patterson. Did you work with Ray by chance? Ray was over there at Hanna-Barbera during those days too, because Ray was on the Tom and Jerry crew.
Right.
Ray had also worked on Fantasia.
Right. When you'd go through Hanna-Barbera in those days, you'd see these guys' names on the doors, and they're old animators, and they were producer-directors at Hanna-Barbera at that time.
Right.
And you said you worked on Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, there was a weekend around Thanksgiving, I think, of '81, and I got stuck doing about 8 or 9 scenes of Scooby-Doo. And I think Scrappy-Doo was in it, and the dumb dog with the buck teeth and the hat, I think he was in it. Was his name Dummy-Doo or something?
I can't remember. It's his cousin. I'll think of it in a minute.
Yeah. So there was a bunch of in-betweening and cleanup I had to do on that, and that was like the most depressing time in my life.
Really?
Yeah. I never wanted to work on that show.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The characters don't really turn all that well.
That wasn't the height of Scooby-Doo anyway.
No,
Yeah, that was
not.
when it was
They weren't
finally...
they weren't using Iwo Takamoto's original designs anymore at that point.
They looked it, though.
Yeah.
They fairly resembled it enough that it looked like they were still from those days. But I wasn't an expert, so who knows? I used to have some of those model sheets, matter of fact. I threw all those away.
Wow. So how'd you get out of that depression?
I called up a couple friends of mine and they just said, don't worry about it, it'll pass. Just get it done and hand it in. So I did.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, and then what happened after that? Like, when did it start picking up again and you started getting excited about the work you were doing?
I think
Scooby-Dum.
that's it.
It's Scooby-Dum.
Yeah.
You had to look it up, folks.
Sorry. Scooby-Doo's country cousin.
Something happened at Pantomime, I think in '82, so there was some more work to do at Pantomime on some commercials. That might have been the year we were doing the Pep Boys commercials. And I think we were doing Circle K commercials also at the same time. And Fred used to do National Lumber, so there was some National Lumber spots to be done.
Fruit? Club sandwich?
That's me.
Oh, that's me. Thank you.
You want to clap or something so you know where to edit that?
No.
Should we leave that
We're
in
not,
there?
yeah.
Okay, we're eating now.
It's the corner booth. This is what we do.
Okay, all right. Long pause.
So, so you started doing commercials, and that's when, because that's when you're doing commercials, you're animating. Or were you doing in between?
I was still doing in-betweening.
Okay.
Yeah, and every commercial usually has a different style. So doing Circle K, Fred would design a whole set of characters for every Circle K commercial. And then Pep Boys was animating these three guys dancing, keep their heads to camera the whole time as their bodies dance around. And I think I got a couple of Pep Boys t-shirts and shirts from that, so that was a good thing.
To jump back, when did you start working on Raggedy Ann?
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No, when I mentioned that, I was saying that after the Raggedy Ann movie was done, a lot of those guys moved out here.
Oh, I gotcha. Because
Yeah.
Dan Haskett was on Raggedy
Right.
Ann, literally. He
Right.
was assisting on the character Raggedy Ann. So I
Right.
assume maybe you guys were working together.
No, I didn't meet him until I moved out here.
Okay.
So it's been, since 1980 when I met him.
Dan Haskett's a animator and character designer. He designed The Little Mermaid, and he designed Belle from Beauty and the Beast. But he's an incredible artist and animator.
It's a good sandwich.
Yeah. I'll have to remember that. The club sandwich on the Hill Street Cafe.
I might just take this home.
California burger's awesome.
Is it? So, you did commercials for how long then?
So I was at Pantomime from 1980 to 1982, doing mostly commercials. Sometimes Fred would get an educational film in there. I went to work at a small studio that Phil Mendez was running for a while. That lasted for about a year. They were doing a feature based on Huckleberry Finn.
Who's Phil Mendez?
Phil Mendez is a great character designer, animator that at one time had been at Disney Feature. Can draw so well.
I know Phil. I'm just mentioning it. The people listening may not.
And he was doing this project with some investor guy that had money. They let Phil go at some point. They had the rest of us. Oh, then they let a bunch of the crew go. And those of us that were left, they said, we want you guys to work in Orange County. So we had to drive to Orange County every day.
Wow.
Because they said, we're tired of driving to Burbank. We want you guys down here with us. And in that crew was Scott Shaw and Mike Sikowski, the great comic book artist from Justice League and other DC comics. Floyd Norman. Chuck Harvey, Disney animator. Mike Humphreys, great background artist.
God, Chuck Harvey. That's a name from the past.
Yeah.
No.
The guy that was in charge was Jerry Ray, who ran the Mexico studio that did Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Wow.
That show was farmed out, it turns out, to Mexico, to
Wow.
this studio in 1959.
No way.
Yeah, so Jerry Ray was the director in charge down there. So we spent like 6 months driving down to Orange County. Then the sheriff turned up and closed the studio down because it all turned out to be a pyramid scheme.
What?
The guy that ran it, Tom Carter, had to do some prison time for that.
Oh, wow. Any animators go with it?
No, we went down on a Sunday night and got all of our stuff to bring home because they were going to padlock the place the next day. And a bunch of us, our checks bounced. So it was not a happy time. So after that, I wound up at Deke for about 6 months on the Get Along Gang.
Okay.
Which is a really bad show that doesn't even show up in reruns or anything. It's so bad.
I think I remember watching that, but yeah.
And they laid us off, and I went to Film Fair working on more commercials. Film Fair did toy commercials and cereal commercials. Keebler Elves cookies, Cookie Crisp cereal. They were doing Rainbow Bright, I think, when I got there. And that was like 4 months. Then I wound up at Marvel doing storyboard cleanup on Muppet Babies. And there was a lot of talent there because they were doing a superhero show called Defenders of the Universe. Or was it Defenders of the Earth? It was based on King Features comic strip heroes like the Phantom, maybe Flash Gordon, and somebody else. Seems like there were 3. But they were all based on King Features comic strip heroes. And so they brought in a whole bunch of superhero guys. They left him out.
Oh, man. He's my favorite superhero.
So there's a ton of talent at Marvel in those days. Filmation was doing He-Man, so they were doing another set of superheroes there. And Hanna-Barbera was still doing a lot of cartoony stuff. And Filmation still had animators working there at that time. And a few years later, they closed Filmation down. A bunch of those guys wound up at Warner Brothers. Another bunch wound up at Disney Features.
Well, I know Dale Bear is a good friend of mine. We did an interview with him. It's not up yet, but soon to be. And Dale started at Filmation. I think he told me like 1970, I think. He was there early on.
Probably earlier than that.
And 69 or 70, right in there, because he was at Disney later in 1970, I believe, because he worked on Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2 and all that stuff. And I did a lot of commercials with Dale. I like working on commercials.
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
It's nice because you get a change of style every commercial.
You get in there, you do it, you're done, and there's the next one.
Right. That's the best deal, I thought, in the early 80s, was working at a commercial studio like Film Fair. Taking on freelance commercial work from the other studios that were doing commercials. Pantomime was still doing commercials. I think I did a job here and there for Murakami Wolf Swenson on Green Giant commercial. And I did some work for Kurtz and Friends in the early 80s.
Kurtz.
And, Spung Buggy, I worked there for a time in the mid-80s for about a month or 2.
And as far as commercials go, nowadays, compared to how it used to be, is there still a lot of 2D, or is it now kind of being taken over by CG?
Seems like I see more CG commercials, but then I don't watch all that much TV.
Okay. I'm just curious if you knew, like, just from within studios.
No, I don't have my ear to the ground for the commercial world anymore. I don't even know who the commercial studios are.
Oh, okay.
There used to be a certain set of studios, and all the guys that ran it, they all knew each other.
Okay.
And they all bid against each other to get those commercials. There was a time when a TV show was on, I think Jim Carrey was the star, and it was about an animation studio. And they were going to shoot it either at Pantomime or at Playhouse, and whatever happened with the bidding and all that, Playhouse Pictures got the job. And they're it used to be on La Brea and near Santa Monica, a little side street, somewhere in there.
Okay.
A bunch of TV commercial studios were in that area. Murakami Wolf was down the street somewhat. Kurtz used to be in Hollywood too, so there's a bunch of them there. Melendez, he was in Hollywood at the time. It was a whole different time back in those days. Because you could do the commercials from November till May, and then you got hired back at the Saturday morning cartoon show from May till November. So if you knew people around town, you could stay working that way.
Well, I think one of the biggest differences now, aside from the fact there's been a downturn in the industry, I think it's creeping back, but now you've got work year round because there's no such thing as Saturday morning cartoons anymore. It's cartoons all the time.
Yeah, because of the channels, the cable channels, they need content and they need to just start cranking them out.
Yeah, when we were at Deep, they were doing from TV cartoons for network plus syndication. So I worked on Heathcliff for a time, and they were doing like 65 half hours of Heathcliff. But then they also got 5 network shows that year, none of which lasted very long. One of them was so bad, based on Wolfman Jack, it got canceled after the 3rd week on ABC. Now, when the network guys can look at your stuff and say it's really bad,
it's bad.
They just pulled the plug. They said, no more. We can't take this. But yeah, that was the first time I was doing syndication stuff, was 84 on Heathcliff. And the next, they were already doing He-Man. That was for syndication. Because He-Man lost all their network shows. In 82, they had one show, Gilligan's Planet.
We used to watch that.
Nobody was at Filmation that year but like 18 guys or 20 guys, that was it. But when they got He-Man the next year, suddenly a ton of people working there. Plus they did a feature, Pinocchio and Snow White. A lot of guys got on that animated, full animation on these features, and you'd see like this dead stuff, and then suddenly full animation by Dan Haskett comes up, or Leonard stuff comes up. Just incredible work.
I think I saw the Pinocchio, and it was really, really creepy.
Did you ever see?
It creeped me out as a little kid. The Disney Pinocchio creeped me out, but this one really creeped me out.
Yeah.
Oh, the Disney Pinocchio was cute.
It creeped me out.
You have problems.
Yeah, I have problems turning into a donkey when you're like. I mean,
what are you drawing every day? You're drawing yellow people. That's kind of creepy. They all got jaundice.
I'm not. Well, yeah, but it wasn't for little kids. It wasn't for little kids. This isn't for little kids.
Did you ever see the original designs that Dan Haskett did for Tiny Toons, where they looked like a baby Bugs Bunny and a baby?
If I did, they went past me, and I didn't.
They were
incredible.
incredible. I wish I had a copy of them.
Yeah.
I had to ask him if he'll bring me.
I have some Dan Haskett Tiny Toon drawings.
I've got a bunch
they're
of
the ones that made the rounds. That like almost everybody had copies of.
Maybe the same ones I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I had the originals in my hand at one point, but I didn't take them.
You didn't put them in your pocket.
I didn't take them, Warner Brothers.
So how'd you get out of Deke? And I mean, how'd you get out of the commercial houses and ended up in Warner's?
Well, that was years later. Let's see.
So what happened in between then?
After Deke, there was Film Fair, then Marvel.
Yeah.
And I was there at Marvel until '86 when they let a whole bunch of us go.
Oh no!
Just one Friday, they just came and said, "Y'all got to go. Get out."
You mean Disney?
This is Marvel.
You mean Disney?
Because every studio does this.
Oh, you mean before Disney bought Marvel?
Yeah, wasn't it last week that they bought it? Come on.
Somebody had told me years ago. Somebody told me years ago, always keep a box by your desk, because you don't know when someone's going to come in and say, "Out."
Wow.
So I always kept the box, and sure enough, one Friday morning they called me in. No, Thursday. Scotty, tomorrow's going to be your last day. What happened? What did I do? Nothing. We're laying off a ton of people. Y'all got to go. Okay. I was thankful to get out of that. I was working on a show called Moon Dreamers.
I've never heard of it. You're
Did you ever work at a place where people were just openly doing drugs?
That was Marvel.
Marvel. Well, what happened in what shows were in Marvel? Because
Moon Dreamers, My Little Pony, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Potato Head Kids.
Oh, okay.
Marvel properties. Wait a minute. What about Batman, Superman,
Nobody was doing
Spider-Man?
that. Nobody was doing that. They did a show based on trucks called Bigfoot. And it was a Saturday morning show, I think. or it might have been syndication, but the whole show was based around, I guess, the trucks.
Yeah, the trucks, yeah.
Had gigantic tires on them.
Did they have faces? Did they talk?
I can't remember now.
Because now I know where Pixar got the idea from.
Tex Avery?
That's right.
Tex Avery MGM cartoons with talking cars. Come on.
Right.
So that went until late 86, and 87 was kind of dry. I did a job for Ken Mundy in 87, and some Australian guy had come to him and said, I want to make a show about a talking car. And all my friends that saw the car said, it looks like a dog. And so I'm doing assistant animation for Ken Mundy on this property. It's like a 10-minute film Ken made. Now, Ken Mundy is a guy that is like one of the biggest fans of trying new stuff in animation. So all the animation on this project was done in grease pencil directly on cell.
Okay.
And then you give it to ink and paint. Now, he had designed the original Fat Albert cartoon special back in the late 60s. And it was done in grease pencil on cells by all the animators.
Wow.
So he was very high on that technique. Has his own 16mm camera and camera stand. So we shot most of it there in this little studio on Laurel Canyon, right next door to 4 and 20. And I learned how to shoot more animation camera there and how to do cross dissolves. 4-frame cross dissolves of one shot. And I got a little bit through first pass, second pass, I messed something up and I said, Ken, and he was home. Ken, I messed up. He said, start over again.
Oh, no.
Couldn't you edit those frames out?
The whole thing was all done over again. So that was the first part of 87. The last part of 87, I started freelancing for Disney TV. I probably started that in 87 on DuckTales. I was doing storyboard cleanup freelance for them. And then early 88, I
love that show, by the way.
People loved it.
I own the show because
Yeah.
I bought the first season because it's just
Did you
So
know
good.
Carol Police?
Yeah.
Yeah, Carol.
I met her at the next job, Little Nemo in Slumberland. I finally got on that to do...
Because Carol was over there at Disney Television.
I run into her every once in a while. And she was at Little Nemo doing designs of Nemo, trying to redesign the kid. And I was designing vehicles for this big parade, which I think they cut, and character turnarounds of the main characters. So that was for a few months. And then after that, I was freelance cleaning up boards for Disney on Rescue Rangers.
You know, very few people even know about that Little Nemo movie. It had some nice stuff in it.
It also had a script that was rewritten 17 times.
That's the problem. But aren't most features like that today?
They probably are, but I mean, this was a typed script.
I remember that movie you're talking about. I just don't know where to get that movie anymore. Like, I think I saw commercials of it when it was going to be theatrically released. Is that
Yeah.
what it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw the commercials. I never saw it, but now I'm curious.
I have it on VHS.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I found it for $1 at the Goodwill store.
Didn't it? It seemed Japanese to me. Something.
It is. It's TMS. The guys that did
They had a
bunch
lot of Americans working on it.
Yeah, they hired an American crew to be pre-production,
Okay.
but they did the animation over there. Yeah, TMS was a really highly sought-after Japanese studio.
Yeah.
I think they did
At
the
the time, it
first
was the best
season of
one.
the Winnie the Pooh cartoon that Disney was doing for TV, for ABC. And I was freelancing on a Deke show for Randy Chafee called Slimer and the Ghostbusters. And I went in and he said, look at what TMS is doing on Winnie the Pooh. And suddenly here's Pooh Bear being chased by a steam engine, a train. And it was so nicely done. And you could just tell there's a lot of drawing going
for
into
TV
this.
animation, that stuff was incredible.
Oh, man. So that was summer of '88. So I animated on Slimer, I animated on Kissy Fur TV show, and
who designed Kissy Fur?
That was Phil Mendez.
Yeah.
I don't remember that show. Doesn't ring a
That
bell.
was a cute looking show.
It was on for at least a season or two, wasn't it? And then he sold another one called Fooper, a blue dog. And that probably lasted a couple seasons too. So that was late 88, early 89 came, and there wasn't too much work. I think I was back to doing storyboard cleanup for Disney. And then I saw that The Simpsons was going to be made into a TV series. And I went down with my portfolio and talked to Dave Silverman and Margot Pipkin. And they said, yeah, we can hire you as a layout guy and maybe even a designer and an animator. And I said, sounds good to me. When do I start? And they said, you'll start on show 1 with this guy. And then they called later and said, we're going to have you start on show 2 with David. So I was on Silverman's crew for shows 2 and 5 and 8. And in the middle of doing stuff on the Christmas show, they said, we need you to help redo shows that were done by a different guy, relay out all this stuff.
What studio is this?
This is Klasky Trupo.
A lot of my class, Cal Arts, started on that crew.
The next season, right? Yeah.
Yeah, at Klasky.
So we had to redo the show that had like the shock sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to redo the one where Bart stole the statue's head. And we redid the next one. I think that one had the dancer in it.
Why did this have to get redone?
The first episode came back in color and Gracie didn't like how it looked. So they said, stop all work on these episodes and we'll redo them.
Gracie Films.
Yeah.
Was it retakes or was it just like a start over?
They said salvage what you can, and the shows were in different stages of development overseas. And I think we wound up relaying out a lot of show 4, 7, and 10.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. They were supposed to premiere the show Margot told us it was going to premiere in the fall of 89. And when those shows came back and they weren't ready, they said, we'll push it back to Christmas and premiere the series in January.
So was this like 1989, 90?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of stuff had to be redone that first season. We rolled into the second season and they made me an assistant director for Dave Silverman. And we did a bunch of shows. I think a couple of them are the animatics I gave you today.
Okay.
And so that season went until February of 91. And then I left and went to Warner Brothers. And I wound up on Tiny Toons, working for Byron. And I did a little bit of time on Batman. It wasn't
Were you
quite
on the
my cup of
first
tea.
season of Tiny Toons or second season?
The first episode I did on Tiny Toons for Byron, I think, was the Sunset Boulevard episode.
I was on Ken Boyer's crew.
This would have been July of 91.
I started in 90. So
Okay.
I started on Tiny Toons before you were there.
Okay. So, well, you know Barry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barry Caldwell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Barry's at Disney with me on the same show I'm on now, 7D.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell him Larry said hi.
Okay. So I did a year at Warner Brothers, and I came back to Film Roman to do Simpsons for 2 more seasons, working for Carlos as his assistant. And then Carlos left, and I became a director for 94 and half of 95. And in 95, I did a Simpson episode, then I did a commercial, and then I did 3 episodes of Seabear and Jamal. And then they picked that up for a series in 96, so I became the producer of that.
I forgot all about that show, yeah.
And in early 97, there was a change at Fox at the network, and they decided if we show a cartoon, we have to own it. So Seabear got canceled because Phil didn't want to give it up. And that's how I wound up back in The Simpsons again. And I directed 2 shows a season for 97 and 98. And then I left to go to... I was on Family Guy for an episode. Then I was on Mission Hill for an episode. And I left that to go to God, the Devil, and Bob for a year. And that got canceled after 3 or 4 weeks on NBC. So many sponsors were boycotting. Religious people were boycotting. And I wound up at Futurama for 2 years directing on Futurama over at Rough Draft. So that was the early 2000s. That was a good experience on Futurama.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun on that show. The scripts were really funny. The crew was really good.
Yeah, I've heard good things
It was
about.
a nice place. It was really good. And then Futurama got canceled.
Of course.
So after that, I wound up at Warner Brothers directing on Scooby-Doo for Chuck Sheets. And I was there for a few months, and they said, you know, we want to do Static Shock again. Can you be the producer with Dennis Cowan, the guy that created it? And I said, sure. So I became like a co-producer with Dennis on Static Shock for 2 seasons. Did a couple more Scooby-Doos the next year because we thought they were going to cancel Static again. They said, nope, we're going to do it again. So I did another show of Scooby, and then I had to go back to Static. And that lasted until sometime in '04, I guess. And then I wound up at Camp Lazlo at Cartoon Network, working for Brian Sheasley, who was timing supervisor for Joe Murray on Camp Lazlo. And that lasted for 3 years. And after that, I was just freelancing. What was I freelancing on? At one point, it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, sheet timing, and Horseland, which is about a bunch of girls that do dances with horses, where they dress up in the big hat and the jodhpurs and the big boots, and they have contests for the horses and who can do the best steps and all that. That's still on. It's on CBS, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's called Horseland. And in '08, it was pretty dry. Oh, I worked on the Spider-Man show that came back.
Spectacular Spider.
In '07, I think I started working on that. And that petered out sometime in '08. I took a timing test and got on King of the Hill. And I was on that till they canceled that. And then I was back to freelancing in '09 and working on the Avengers, doing sheet timing freelance, and Boondocks. I did timing on Boondocks too. And that was most of '09. And then 2010 came around, and it was getting dry again, and I wound up on Pound Puppies at Hasbro in the Film Roman building.
Right.
Doing storyboard revisions, which was a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I learned how to use the Cintiq and Photoshop and a little bit of Final Cut Pro.
Okay, cool.
And I got that because Chuck Sheets and Eric Keyes recommended me for the job.
Right.
And the guys running the show, Paul Germain, used to work at Gracie Films, and he's the one that got Gracie to pick Klasky Csupo to do The Simpsons. So that's how I met him way back then. And then he quit Gracie, I think, and created Rugrats at Klasky Csupo.
Oh, okay.
So all these guys that you meet, you keep meeting them through the years, you know? So that was 2010. 2011 came around, and it was back to freelancing again. It was pretty dry. And I think I was doing some work on, was it a cartoony show I did in 2011? That was kind of a down time, 2011. My parents had, and my wife's parents had passed, so we had a lot to deal with in those days.
Oh.
And I must have been freelancing most of 2011. And 2012 came, and I got a job at Disney TV, and I'm still there now. I was on Phineas and Ferb, and now I'm on 7D, The Seven Dwarfs, before they meet Snow White.
Oh, okay.
Totally different designs and everything.
Okay.
And it's written more like a show for 12 to 16-year-olds.
Really?
It's a lot of wisecracking jokes in the show. It's a
Okay.
children's show, but older kids and adults would get it too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious. I haven't. Is it on now?
It'll be on next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I'll be able to see it because I don't have cable or TV, but
You know, these things show up online sooner
Yeah.
or later, and they'll put up trailers and commercials for it, so you'll be able to see it that way.
It's a pretty one.
but you've
One okay?
Could I have a box for this?
and you worked everywhere. I mean, you've done so much. Did you work on G.I. Joe at Marvel?
When Hasbro was doing it in 2010, I was freelancing for Hasbro upstairs doing Joe, and I was downstairs doing Pound Puppies during the day.
Oh, okay.
And taking sheets home at night.
But you didn't work on G.I. Joe.
In the 80s?
The 80s
No.
G.I. Joe.
No. A bunch of my friends worked on it as producers, directors, and storyboard guys. These are superhero guys doing that stuff. So I knew all of them. The studio at that point had 3 buildings, one of which was on Havenhurst. And when you went downstairs to the back of the building, it was the runway to Van Nuys Airport. And once in a while, C-130 transport planes from the National Guard would take off and land there.
What?
And shake the whole building.
Wow.
So that was where I was doing Moondreamers, which is a Sunboat production. And they were in league with Marvel at the time.
I see.
And I guess they put the deals together with Marvel and the toy company to do things like Moondreamers and Gem, the Gem and the holograms.
Yes.
Potato Head Kids, Glow Friends, which were a bunch of worms with no arms. They just had stubs. I thought they were amputated or something. So they had so many people. They had 3 buildings to do all this work. And there were 2 on Havenhurst, and then the main one at Sepulveda Oxnard. So there was a ton of work for like 3 years. There was tons of work to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that you had spent your time over on the Simpsons was short, and then you left, and then you came back to film Roma.
Yeah.
So when did you leave the Simpsons the first time?
At the end of the 2nd season.
At the end of the 2nd season.
Yeah. I wanted to do something different, so I went to Warner Brothers. Did a year there. That was my first tour at Warner Brothers.
I've got a burning question. How was your sandwich?
I'm taking it home. I should have ordered the soup.
He said it was good.
Not one bite yet.
I finished a quarter
Oh,
of it.
okay, 1/4. That's what happens when you're interviewing. You don't get to eat.
Sorry, sir.
Oh, that's okay.
In the first, so just out of curiosity, I've heard of some of the stories here, but so what was the first season of The Simpsons like? Was it like a big college dorm room full of just madness?
There were actually like 4 rooms. We were in a building that was, I think, owned by Bob Clampett. And his widow and daughter and son were downstairs running a company. Maybe it was called Bob Clampett Enterprises or something. They would do cells based on Warner Brothers characters to be sold.
Okay.
And they would hire some of my friends to do it, like Dan Haskett.
Yeah, Dan did a bunch of those.
And we were upstairs behind a locked gate. And did y'all put down something?
What? I didn't even know. I was waiting for him to. Okay.
Anyway, we're upstairs behind a locked gate in this old building where the windows actually went up. The building was built sometime in the 20s or 30s, and you could actually smoke in the building at that point.
Right. How very healthy.
And one morning we're in there toiling away, and suddenly the building is shaking. There's an earthquake, and we're like, is this building going to stand this earthquake? It was like June of '89, I guess, or something, or July. And they told us, well, the building's been earthquake-proof. And what does that mean? Well, it means you have 6 seconds to get out.
5, 4, 3.
It took me 6 seconds just to tell you that.
There you go. I'll get your plastic bag.
All right. So that first season, that was quite an adventure. They had one room that had a balcony, and the pigeons built a nest on the balcony. And there's animators working in the room doing layouts, and pretty soon they've got the balcony doors open, and the pigeons are walking in, and people are starting to scratch their legs. Well, what's wrong, you guys? The pigeons have mites, which are biting the animators.
Oh my god. That's frightening.
So another weird thing is there was one bathroom, and it was like you're in a house. You know, it was like a sink, a toilet. It might have been a shower. I don't know, but the guy that owned the studio kept a black cloth towel to dry your hands on. Well, after about a day, 35 people drying their hands meant that towel never got dry. And it just was getting more and more funky and dirty. And I kept waiting for him and his cleaning crew to change the towel, and he never changed. And at some point I came in with like 3 rolls of paper towels. I said, y'all, this has gone far enough. Here's the paper towels, all right? And I think he changed over to paper towels after that.
Where are you from originally?
Philadelphia.
Where'd the y'all come from? I'm from Oklahoma, so I could understand that.
It's a colloquialism, you might say.
It's an official word in Oklahoma.
Yeah, one of my friends is from Oklahoma.
Y'all come back now.
So yeah, that was the first season on The Simpsons. And they hired us and said, don't get too comfortable because you guys will be out of here in October. Thank you. And October came and we were working like 12 hours a day at that point, trying to get these shows done. And they said, looks like it won't be October. Maybe in November we'll be able to let you guys go. And it just kept going. And we didn't finish season 1, I think, till late January.
Okay.
It just kept going and going. Well, okay. It was a long employment term. So it turned out to be a good thing.
Well, I could understand why you would want to leave perhaps after a second season. Did you have that? Was that sort of treatment you got in the second season too, or did they start getting their act together?
Well, in the second season, they had 5 directors instead of 3. And they gave every director an assistant director, so that's how I got that job.
Right. And the directors were the original first 3 were what? David, Wes,
and Kent Butterworth, and then Rich Moore took his place.
Okay.
And then the second season they had Dave, Wes, Rich, and Mark Kirkland and Jim Reardon.
Oh, interesting.
So everybody had to have an AD, so it was 5 more bodies had to be hired to do that. So it was me, Carlos, Anderson. Anderson was Jim Reardon's AD. Bob Anderson.
Bob Anderson.
Yeah. And Mark's AD was, I forgot the guy's name now. I don't think he came back the 3rd season. I forgot who that guy was.
What season are you on now, Louis, at Simpsons?
It's like 25 or 24.
Yeah, 25.
25 seasons.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it started on 6. Not quite 3. Not quite 1 or 2. This is why I'm so interested, because it's just like, oh man, what happened before I even showed up?
The show was really awesome.
Yeah, before they started telling us not to animate.
Which we actually did first season. I was hired to do some animation in addition to my layouts. They would say, can you just animate these scenes also? And I animated
Bart's head twisting in opposite directions.
Yeah, that first season they said, don't do that anymore. But I actually did some animation on Bart the Genius, of the smart kid dropping a dime on Bart after he did the graffiti about the principal.
Right.
Let's see. Oh, they hired Brad Bird to be a consultant on the show. And so he would come into the studio sometimes and sit there and discuss stuff and redraw stuff, give notes on storyboards and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Kevin Petrolak animated the main titles. Do you know Kevin? And that was wild to see that come together. And then they put the music to it, and we all said, wow, that looks pretty cool, man. So I think they've redone the main titles since then.
Yeah,
right?
I worked on the redo of the main titles.
Was that because they had to make it widescreen?
They had to make it widescreen. They wanted to update some of the characters, and yeah, but it was mostly because they wanted to make it widescreen.
Yeah.
So we basically took all the original artwork, the original actual animation, put it with the new, cleaner model. Okay. And then we just basically traced it, but put it on, quote unquote, on model for the current look. But we did it. We did what we was told.
Yeah.
And, Yeah, and there was a lot of reinterpretation of stuff that you had to. Yeah, it's like because the model is different enough so that you had to like reanimate it while using the original animation as a guide
Right.
and trying to keep the same thing looking the way. So
Wow.
yeah, I worked on the sequence of Maggie in the car.
Blowing the horn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was a time back then. Peter Chung was at the studio.
Oh, he was?
He was coming in because he was animating, I think, a Sesame Street piece or 2 or 3 for Gabor at the time.
Okay.
And then later that year, when the guys sold Rugrats, Peter was directing the Rugrats pilot, which I actually got to work on.
Oh.
I think some of the Rugrats drawings of his are in the bag there.
Oh, okay.
So I spent some time doing that, and I got to know Peter a bit more. I had met him like in 81 or 82 through
Okay.
another friend from Cal Arts. And at the Klasky Chupo, I got to talk to him a bit more about what he liked to do. And the next year, he sent me a script, and I read it, and he called me up and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's a lot of gunfire in this thing." And the next year, he came to visit me at WB, and he said, "I've got a videotape. I want to show you this show I did." It was Aeon Flux.
Was it the original shorts for MTV?
Yeah. Liquid television.
Well, yeah. Liquid television that was shown on MTV at Liquid Television.
I've got a DVD of Liquid Television.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I taped some of the episodes and I transferred them to DVD.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've got the Flux tape, but I haven't transferred any of my stuff onto DVD. I totally should.
Got to take the time and do all this
Yeah,
stuff.
I know. But I've got like hundreds of video VHS tapes that you can't buy the stuff for anymore. That you have to have to transfer.
Yeah, I threw away about 400 or so VHS tapes because I transferred them to DVD. Take up a lot less space.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, because I got drawers full of this stuff. I got to get rid of that stuff. I need the drawer space.
Yeah.
Stick a baby in there.
Yeah.
Can we keep having kids? Yeah. Okay. Wow. So there was you were gonna tell me something about the deadlines for the Simpsons shows. I think that was one of the things that you were gonna. What was it? I forgot.
They had crazy deadlines.
There was something about the.
They had quotas for us. They wanted us to do 20 scenes a week, but they kept writing these shows with crowd scenes in them. And at one point, I was laying out crowd scenes on show where Bart sawed the head off of the statue,
Okay.
and the whole town is chasing him. And production came to me and said, "You only did like 4 or 5 scenes last week. What's up with that?" And I pulled out this rough drawing of a land. I said, "This is what's up with that." And I had to do all these crowd shots. They said, "Oh."
So there were like 1,000 people chasing Bart Simpson.
With no designs. We had to make up all the designs for those people. So when I did the sack race in one of those shows, I had to create most of those designs for those people. And they'd look at it and say, "Well, I guess so." And they just let it go through. Who had time to do it? I put Miles Davis in one shot where Mr. Burns has the band playing. He tells the guys, "Quit that infernal tootling." And when they cut to the band and they put their instruments down, and I tried to make it look as much like Miles as I could. Hopefully his people won't sue the show. Nobody saw it but me.
It's been a couple years.
Yeah, it was like that was in 1989. So, but yeah, we had to design most of the stuff because layout had to make the show go.
Right.
And character design, they didn't hire Dale for a while. Phil Ortiz was hired at the beginning, so then there were 2 of them, but they needed more than that because the guys kept writing these crowd shots. Well, who's going to design all that, So yeah, the deadlines were like, "Can you explain why you're not doing so many scenes?" "Yes, I'm doing crowd scenes." "Okay, we'll cut you some slack." There's still 400 scenes in the show, you can't get away from that. So that's what the deadlines were like back then. And redoing the shows meant doing the 12-hour days. And I'd get to the studio at 9:30 or 10 in the morning and stay till 9 or 10 at night.
Wow.
Redoing all these layouts, like the shock sequence. That was like a week and a half doing that. I think I spent 2 or 3 weeks animating the girl dancing for Homer's Night Out. But it was so much fun to do it because I was practically animating this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nice thing to finally stretch out, you know. After doing years of storyboard cleanup, you just working this little tiny thing. It was nice to do layouts big and animate characters.
Right.
And these are the emotions that you think they should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the acting and the close-ups and medium shots. I just love doing all that. So that's why The Simpsons first season became one of my favorite gigs that I've had.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And also the crew.
And the crew was a bunch of guys and gals from various studios because it was such a hard year that year. And most of them left for second season. And they all got union jobs at Disney and other studios.
Wow.
Yeah. So most of the second season crew mostly was new people.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Because if you're working a union gig all these years and suddenly you're at The Simpsons, you've lost a year, you want to get back to your union hours. So a lot of guys left to go back to union jobs. Yeah. So second season, we had to break in a whole lot of new people. Some of them were good. Some really loved it. Other people moved on after that. You know, it's like, it's not for everybody. But, you know, I had a good time.
And then you left and you came back. What shows did you direct? Remember?
My first show to direct was And Maggie Makes Three.
Oh, okay, right.
And the second show I did that season was that I can't recall what show that was, the second one. But Maggie Makes Three was quite a good script to work on. It was very touching to see newborn Maggie, and I think she grabbed Homer's finger or something, and he just melted. He had been angry up to that point, and he just saw his little baby, and he just loved that. So that was a really good show. I think the studio liked that show a lot. Yeah. But the second show that season, I'm not sure what that was offhand. And then the next season, 95, I did so much work that season, that year. I can't even recall what show that was in 95.
Because all the stuff ended blurring at the after a while.
There was a show where the teachers went on strike. I did that. There was
PTA disbands.
Yeah. I think that was 95. And then there was a show with Homer as a truck driver.
Okay.
Maximum Homer Drive. There was a show with Marge as a real estate agent, Realty Bites.
All right.
There was a show with Burns and the $1 Trillion Bill. And there was one other one. Oh, Homer as a security guard.
Gosh, I don't remember that one.
That's called Mayor to the Mob.
Oh, right. Now I remember.
Yeah. So that was my career at The Simpsons.
What has been your favorite job so far? Or studio, at least, to work on, with, or in?
Probably Rough Draft.
Rough Draft?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, right, on Futurama.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Klasky Chupo first season on The Simpsons doing layout. And then Warner Brothers producing Static Shock with Dennis Cowan.
Static is a very, very popular character.
Is he? There's no toys.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Some guy came to the studio to explain to us why some shows get big toy deals and others don't. And one of the things is the character has to have a hideout and a vehicle.
Oh.
And that's what you base your toy line on.
Winnie the Pooh didn't have a vehicle.
Winnie the Pooh's selling a whole different kind of toy. Now, when Pooh Bear gets a gun,
That would be awesome.
he'll drive around in a cave car, right? But boys' shows have to have a vehicle and a headquarters. And when he showed us the shows that make it as toys, it's G.I. Joe, Batman, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There were like 8 shows on this list, and they all had these same things. So the kids can play with action figures that they put into a car that drives into the headquarters. Superman doesn't have that.
Right.
What about the Fortress of Solitude?
He's got a fortress, but he got no car.
He doesn't have a vehicle.
But he can fly.
That limits you to doing this.
Is that why?
Yeah, you don't want the imagination part to come in. You want the...
You know, I heard that Nicolas Cage, when he was actually being considered to play Superman, and he was going to have a car. Maybe that's why.
And it was called Supercar.
Yeah, and he carried it, and he was going to carry his outfit in a paper bag or something.
I saw the supercar yesterday. I was at a store and I saw the car and it was Superman. It had Superman logo on it and it was a car.
But Jimmy Olsen drove it, right?
But okay, well, actually, we've been doing this for quite a bit, so maybe we should
Wrap it up.
wrap it up.
Well, we want to make sure everybody remembers that they can always visit us on Facebook,
All right, at the
thecornerbooth.net on Facebook.
cornerbooth.net.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's our
Your official Facebook page.
Our
Facebook
official
page.
Facebook page.
and we're also online at thecornerbooth.net.
And our shows are on iTunes.
And yep,
That's how I listened to him, was on iTunes. I think.
yeah, they're all through iTunes.
Yeah.
And Larry, you have a site?
You can visit my studio page on Facebook, Ghost Train Pictures, and soon the Ghost Train Pictures the Ghost Train Pictures website will be launching soon. Right now it's just got a construction page, but that's coming up.
Yeah, and my sites are luisescobarblog.com and thedrawingwebsite.com. Swinton, do you have a portfolio or
Yes.
presence online?
Yes.
Or
Just type in my name on Google or IMDb, and it'll direct you eventually to my blog folio, which is Scotty Drawings.
ScottyDrawings.com?
Yeah. And
Or is
something like-
it Scotty Drawings Blogspot?
Blogspot. Yeah. And to my YouTube channel with video clips of shows I've directed and produced.
Oh, cool!
Yeah.
Oh, we'll probably I'm probably going to link to that actually.
When are you ready? I guess that wraps it up for another edition of
The Corner Booth.